if you're Israeli blooded and you travel to Iran, you have a low survival rate, unless you can assimilate and blend into the culture. And the same thing if you're an American tourist and you travel to Iran, you have a low survival rate. And the reason for that is because when we travel, we are subject to international law. So, Iranian parliament, and this is the real danger for America and Israel. Iranian parliament does not know the difference between the nation of Israel and queer nation. Iranian parliament does not know the difference between the nation of America and queer nation. And on the battlefield, it would be extremely important to make this distinction, okay? So that you're not listed guilty by association. So that there's not a terrible coincidence. And the tragic factor that Iran thinks that an American base is a queer base, or that an Israeli base is a queer base, right? Because under Iranian law, all citizens of queer nation are lined up on death row. You know, how tragic for an innocent Israeli or an innocent American to be lined up on death row just because Iranian parliament does not know the difference between America and queer nation. Iranian parliament does not know the difference between Israel and queer nation, while Iranian parliament is currently lining up queer nation on death row. By making the distinction that Israel is not queer nation, and by making the distinction that America is not queer nation, we have the hope to survive. We have the hope to not be flushed under the queer dictatorship. Now let's suppose that you're stationed in the East. I'm going to use Iran as an example, but it could be any number of nations where this could happen. Okay? Remembering that when we travel, we're subject to international law, and in these geographical zones, queer nation is lined up to be executed. There's a death sentence on queer nation in these Middle Eastern zones. So let's suppose you are an American base and you have nothing to do with queer nation because you pledge allegiance to your one nation under one flag, under one God. You pledge allegiance to the American flag, not to the queer nation flag. And you're an American base. But let's just suppose someone wants to play a trick on you, a really sick joke to send you to your grave. And the Slug-Anon flies over your American base and drops a queer nation flag. So all of a sudden, what used to be the American base now appears to be a queer nation base in a geographical zone where queer nation is listed on death row. And what a tragedy that would be for American soldiers and Israeli soldiers if we fail to make this distinction very clear that America is not queer nation and Israel is not queer nation. Every now and then, a political leader rises up in what so-called the UN, and the political leader in the East will say, we never heard of such a thing as gay marriage. We never heard of such a thing. There's no such a thing in our country. No such a thing. No such a thing. And the reason for that is because in all tribes, nations, and parliaments, with healthy chromosomal identity, naturally there could be no such thing as gay marriage. Okay? Because that only happens in certain Western societies, or when the West pushes their dogma, the queer dogma, on the East. It only happens in societies where children have been brainwashed to from a young age and injected with this lethal toxic dogma, a lethal dogma injection that really just that leaves them void of what's Darwinian procreative hetero instinct, which all mammals have by genetic design. And that would be why every now and then an Eastern leader rises up, the so-called UN, to make the statement. Never heard it. No such a thing. No such thing as gay, and not in our country. Okay, and that just has to do with what parliaments have healthy chromosomal identity, what tribes have healthy chromosomal identity, and which don't. Okay? If the satanic cult of feminism never infected your system, then there could be no such thing as a queer nation. If the satanic cult of feminism never infected your system, then there could be no such thing as gay marriage. Gay marriage is the social construction of the satanic cult of feminism. Okay, what the feminist dictatorship does is the equivalent of taking a bucket of whiteout and just dumping it over the chromos of humanity, leaving the DNA of humanity with shattered chromosomal identity, at which point the satanic cult of feminism socially constructs this myth and forces this myth on the human population. And this myth is the dogma injection of gender identity. Gender is not identity. Chromos are identity. But if you don't have a healthy chromosomal identity, then you're more likely to buy into the myth of gender identity.